still there. Everything's still happening. Good morning, everyone. I think you're starting to come in, take a seat, pick up a coffee, put down your phones, lock up your kids, potentially. I'm not sure. You will see, folks, that there is a poll, an online poll it should be in front of you right now. If you could, please fill that in while you're taking a seat. And also in the chat, if you could let myself and Oscar know where you are from in the world. We are in Sydney. I don't know wherever you are, but let us know. Sydney too. A lot of Sydneys. It's raining here. It's chucking it down where I am. Our living room. That's my wife in Sydney. Yes, that's Marla. That's the lady who won your books, Oscar, a couple of years ago.
Oh, fantastic.
Townsville. Welcome, everyone. Wellington. We have some international folks. Hamilton, New Zealand. Went to a rugby game there. Folks, we're ready to kick off. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ian Collier. I work with Hanover Fairs. I'm responsible for the TechFest series of conferences. We are based here in Sydney. It's my pleasure to welcome our speaker this morning. He's in a list of people who have been fantastic speakers over the last few weeks. What we are doing here is we are putting together a stream of content that is hopefully inspiring you, changing the way that you think and helping you through this very strange journey that everyone is on right now. Today's session is going to be very, very helpful. I've known Oscar for a few years and I've seen him speak, and he's a wonderful speaker. So you're in for a real treat, and you're also going to learn some really good stuff as well. Today's session is called 3 Listening Hacks in a Virtual World for Work and Home. And I think it is a very, very pertinent issue right now. Oscar was head of all things Microsoft for the Asia Pacific group many years, has got a glowing CV and is doing incredible work in his new organization. So without further ado, I'll pass you on. Oscar, welcome. Thank you.
G'day, Ian, and welcome everybody into this space. Welcome to a world of working that we've all had to adjust to very quickly, and we've all done a magnificent job of that. So for most of us, we think we're struggling, but we're really adapting. And for most of us, this way of working via video conference is something that we've all adjusted to really quickly. And despite the fact that there are many challenges, one of the things we should do is acknowledge progress and acknowledge how well we're doing as well. Because right now there's plenty of messages about what's not working, what's getting in our way, what's hard, what's difficult, what's a challenge. Right now, congratulations to you, and congratulations for you being in this space. Today, we're going to spend the time to understand what's getting in the way of our listening at work and at home, which is exactly the same place for a lot of us right now listening on this call. One of the challenges we all have when it comes to listening is the fact that we don't realize that listening is actually a self-awareness challenge. 83% of people think they're above average car drivers. 84% of people think they're above average IQ, and 86% of us think we're above average listeners. And this is one of the challenges we all have when it comes to listening. If we go back to December 30, 2019, Dr. Li was an ophthalmologist in the Wuhan hospital in China. And he sent a WeChat message to 6 of his friends. They were all doctors, and he was very concerned that he was seeing emerging a virus that was impacting the elderly much more than anybody else. Those 6 people shared that information with others on WeChat as well. And of course, it spread very quickly, so quickly, in fact, that the Chinese authorities got to see what Dr. Li had said. Only 3 days later, the Chinese authorities went to visit Dr. Li and said, look, what you're saying is completely wrong. You need to recount it. This is not true. It's not happening. And over a period of a week, Dr. Li was trying to figure out what should he do. All this time he's working in the hospital to try and help patients. Eventually, Dr. Lee is admitted as a patient with COVID-19. And we lost 3 weeks in the battle for COVID-19 because the authorities just didn't want to listen to what he was saying. And as a result of that, we have a global pandemic. Yet for most of us at home or at work, the cost of not listening isn't a global pandemic. It's broken relationships, it's frustration, it's misunderstanding, it's confusion, it's chaos, it's conflict. And we need to be conscious that sometimes the biggest cost of not listening is the fact that we're ignoring conversations we need to have. And quite often those conversations that we need to have are actually conversations with ourselves. So listening is a self-awareness issue. Ian, I'm curious what the poll slides come back with in terms of where everybody's rating themselves when it comes to listening.
I'm trying to see the scores. My apologies. I'm trying. It hasn't come up. Come back to me, Oscar. I apologize. Come back to me. I'm sorry.
Having done this over 1,000 times to audiences large and small, what we find consistently is most people rate themselves above average listeners. And as a result, the biggest problem when it comes to listening is our own self-awareness.
Oscar, sorry, 52% above average listener.
Fantastic. So, Ian, how many are showing in poor and below average?
It's less than 5%.
Less than 5% of us think we're poor listeners. When the question is asked the other way, how many people do we think are poor average or above average listeners? The tables are switched, Ian. 86% of people think most people are either poor or below average speakers. So we think we know what great listening is, but we really don't. We don't because we didn't have a listening teacher at school. We had a maths teacher, we had an English teacher. Ian, you've got a different accent to me. Maybe in your school you had a listening teacher?
I'm afraid we certainly didn't. We were lucky if we had teachers, I think.
So wherever you go around the world, whether that's in Asia or the Americas or Africa or Europe, it's very consistent. There's no listening teachers out there for anybody. And yet, Ian, I want you to think of the teacher that made the biggest impact on your life. And for all of you listening right now, I want you to think about the teacher who had the biggest impact on your life as well. It can be a primary school teacher, it can be a middle school teacher, it can be a high school teacher, it might be somebody at university. Once you've got them in mind, I guarantee you one thing, they are the teacher you felt that listened to you the most. Not only did they hear what you said, but they saw inside you something which was unique, which was you and your potential. And we all have a very soft spot in our hearts when it comes to those kinds of teachers as well. So with listening, the other people who are really highly influential in our listening is our parents. And typically they'll smack you on the back of the head and say, why aren't you listening? Or I've told you this 1,000 times, why aren't you listening? And for most of us, the way our parents interact with us and the way our parents interacted with each other were our only listening role models. And I'm on a quest to create 100 million deep listeners in the world. And to do that, we have to make people aware, first of all, what gets in the way for everybody when it comes to listening. So the poll is a really good example of how to role model listening when we start off. So I want to listen to you and see where you are on this journey. But Ian has graciously allowed me to share some slides right now as well. And I'm going to pose a question that I would love you all to answer in the chat window. And the question is really simple. When it comes to other people listening to you, what frustrates you when other people don't listen to you? So take a moment, go to the chat window. What frustrates you? Is it the fact that they're staring at their phone? Is it the fact that they're not paying attention? Is it the fact that you know they're drifting off? Is it the fact that they're interrupting you? Is it the fact that they're completely lost in the conversation? What is it when it really frustrates you when other people don't listen to you? So we've got some lovely examples around eye contact, looking at someone else altogether, not acknowledging what I've said. We're going to spend a bit of time talking about that and what it means there. Oh, I really love this one. They're really not interested at all in hearing or saying what I've got to say. They speak while I'm still trying to speak. They're not hearing the words I'm saying. They interrupt. They relate the conversation back to themselves. A beautiful example of one of the four villains of listening, the dramatic listener. They love telling stories because they just get lost in your story as well. And for a lot of us, 86% of us, the research tells us the biggest distraction is electronic devices. It's mobile phones, it's cell phones, it's laptops, it's Slack notifications, it's email notifications, it's SMS, text message notifications. And right now, at home, while you're watching this, some of these distractions could be even bigger. Some of these distractions could be your kids. Some of these distractions could be your pets. A lot of us don't have dedicated spaces when it comes to listening. So these things are really consistent. What people get frustrated by are things that they aren't necessarily conscious about themselves when it comes to listening as well. Ian, which one of these are you most guilty of?
Am I guilty of?
Yeah.
Um, I'm pretty perfect, frankly. I think the one that where you're listening to them, but you're thinking about what you're actually going to come back with, so you don't sound silly, or you're
Yeah.
not. So you've got an answer.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
suppose I'm guilty. I suppose I'd be guilty of that.
Yeah, and you've been guilty of that because I've watched all your replays of your webinars, and it's really interesting. Your listening is really strong in the first third of the webinar, but then it drifts off. Sometimes you catch yourself and ask them to repeat the question. So sorry for the detective work in the background there, but that's another issue we all face. We get Zoom fatigue, we drift off. We can only hold attention for 7 minutes. That's why it's really critical to break up and have polls and chat sessions going on there as well. So it's interesting what Vanessa says. She notices exactly that that's the issue you
You know,
have in when it comes to listening.
yeah, yeah.
So,
She
so
never
the,
listens to me anyway. She never listens, so I don't know what she's on about.
well, here's an interesting insight. Women listen to feel, men listen to fix. And I think, Ian, when you think about listening, you think about fixing something or solving something. Vanessa probably only wants you to listen to what she's got to say and not necessarily solve it. And
Have
for
you
a
been
lot,
talking? Have you two been talking?
look, for a lot of men out there, women aren't broken, so don't try and fix them. They're just fine how they are. A lot of the time, they just want to talk it out. That's all. It doesn't mean you have to fix it. It just means you need to talk it out. So here's the first hack that you guys need to all be aware of. And the first hack is the neuroscience of listening. How does your brain function when it comes to listening? I'm speaking at about 125 words a minute. A cattle yard auctioneer will be talking at about 200 words per minute, and a horse race caller will call at about 200 words per minute. But you can still have comprehension at 200 words per minute. Interesting little fact, Ian. Blind people can listen at up to 2.5 times speed when it comes to audiobooks and podcasts, and they can still have full comprehension because they don't have the visual distractions that sighted people have as well. They have amazing memories, by the way, too, as a result. That's one of the ways they can see through their memory. So as I speak at 125 words a minute, you can listen at 400 words a minute. We have peripheral vision. We also have peripheral hearing, so we can hear other things that are going on at any one point in time. And what that means is you are wired neurologically to be distracted. You're actually filling in 275 words right now. You're saying, gee, this guy's talking too slow. Oh, gee, I thought he'd be talking about something different. I really didn't get that poll slide. That didn't make any sense to me. Why does he keep asking me to go back into the chat window? Oh, have I made lunch? Do I need to make lunch? Oh, what's the kids asking me right now? So for all of us, whenever we're speaking to somebody else, there's distractions going on inside their brain because they speak at 125 words a minute. Yeah, you can listen at up to 400 words a minute. So the first hack is really simple. Anticipate you will be distracted. And distractions take really two primary forms. external distractions and internal distractions. The external distractions might be something that caught your eye. The external distractions might be an electronic device. The external distractions might be another sound that goes on. Equally, there's internal distractions too. These internal distractions are all about the story that you're hearing from the person. So the minute Ian said, have you been talking to my wife, that kind of drifted me away to start thinking about when me and my wife made the discovery together that I didn't need to fix her and she just wanted me to listen to her. So I had to catch myself and come back in the conversation. So knowing that I don't speak fast enough, if you jumped off this webinar right now and the only thing you learn is the 125/400 rule, that you are programmed to be distracted, then that's all you need to know. And what that means is you need to anticipate distractions, whether they're external or whether they're internal distractions for you as well. By far the most commented thing on our podcast or in our book or in our research is the knowledge that if I speak at 125 words a minute, I can listen at 400 words, I am going to be distracted, so it's okay to drift off and come back in the conversation. By the way, Ian, I'm not a perfect listener, far from it, but I think the difference between you and me is I notice when I'm distracted and I come back into the conversation quicker as well. So that's the first tip, that's the first hack, the 125/400 rule. So here's the question right now for you. What do you struggle with personally when it comes to your own listening? Pop it in the chat box.
We've actually just got a question there from Yolanda. Why are we wired to be distracted? She says.
Oh, that's a lovely question, Yolanda. We're wired to be distracted so we can actually survive as humans. This sound allows us to anticipate the sound of an animal or the sound of a competing tribe. And when we all grew up in the savannas in Africa, the primitive part of the brain, the one that connects us with our hearing as opposed to our listening, is there designed to make sure that we can hear everything that's going on, not just what we're listening to in the moment. Thanks for that beautiful question. So how are we going, coming back to what's getting in your way? What do you struggle with when it comes to listening right now?
So there's Beck waffling on to-do lists from Yolanda. If someone isn't engaging, I find myself moving on, deliberately distracting myself.
Oh, that's fantastic, because obviously I haven't been waffling on and I haven't been, and people are still engaging in the chat window here. So that's terrific. And I think for a lot of us, what we want to do is do a quick compare and contrast. What do we put in that frustrates us with other people? And what do we put in that we struggle with when it comes to listening also? Because for most of us, these aren't mirror images of each other. We don't necessarily see what we struggle with when it comes to listening as much as what we see other people do poorly when it comes to listening. So for a lot of us, when we think about our childhoods or our teachers or growing up, we can often say this person was a really good listener. One of the fallacies about listening is listening is a passive activity. Listening is something that involves no interruption. That's not true at all. I think one of the big things that people don't understand, we're going to talk about the 125/900 rule shortly, Ian, which is the speaker's problem. They speak at 125 words a minute, yet they can think at up to 900 words a minute. And that's a different problem. So which ones are popping up there for you, Ian, that are really interesting or surprising in the chat window?
They're all fairly, I think they're all certainly done them at some point. Keeping my attention on what is being said. I've been in so many meetings where you think, what am I doing here? Like, am I ever going to get this time again?
Yeah, that's a beautiful example of the lost listener. When we look at the 4 villains of listening, when you go and take the listening quiz, you can find out all about that. And this is really common where people get invited into Zoom meetings and they're not sure why they should be there. One of the really good questions you want to ask yourself is, should you be there in the Zoom meeting as well? I think multitasking is a myth. We've interviewed a number of neuroscientists. We've interviewed couple of professors of attention, particularly one that I remember was Professor Stefan from the Netherlands, who's dedicated the last 20 years of his life talking about what multitasking is and isn't. Now, what I want to draw a distinction is he says you can drive a car and look out the rear vision mirror and have the music going on. No problem. Multitasking. Congratulations. Well done. But for complex and creative tasks, which as the world moves from the industrial economy to the information economy and now to the imagination economy, Ian, most of us have to do a lot of processing in the working part of memory, the most modern part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. And when we think about this part of the brain, we've got all these browser tabs open. How many browser tabs do you think's open in your mind right now, Ian?
Well, not too many now because I'm concentrating with you. I am actively listening, but I did think just 2 seconds ago, I wonder what's for tea tonight. I
Yeah,
honestly
there you
did.
go. You know, with all these browser tabs open, listening to complex creative tasks where you have to collaborate and co-design with other people, which most of us have to do, that happens in the most modern part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and multitasking isn't possible in the working memory. The working memory can task switch very rapidly, but you can't multitask. So you get a bit of a tax or a gravity on the kind of work you do. If you go deep and switch everything off and get it done, it happens much quicker, but we are distracted. Our ego gets in the way and we try and go, oh, I can do that while I'm doing that. The quality of your work does decline, and the professors of neuroscience and attention are giving me great feedback on what to do about it, which we're going to talk about next. 2 weeks ago, we did an additional piece of research. So I have a research database of 1,410 listeners that we've been tracking for 2.5 years in, and they give us feedback on what's getting in their way when it comes to their listening. And the biggest thing that we're all in a new context is around video conferences. So we asked the group, 523 of them responded, and we asked them this simple question: well, what's getting in your way when it comes to the video conference and listening in on video conferences? Now, it's no surprise to me, distractions all over the place, interruptions, no surprise to me. You mentioned on a couple of the webinars that you notice people interrupt a bit more on the video conferences because they're not sure when people are finished because of some kind of delay. Simple tip there, Ian, when you're not sure if they're finished, just count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, or take a deep breath in through your nose, down your lungs, and then out through your mouth. You'll work out quickly if they've finished or not. But the big one that's jumped out is a new distraction, derailer, something that's getting in the way. Kids, if you look carefully in there, it's also got pets in there. A lot of people don't have isolated working conditions. I'm working with clients right now who are sharing the dinner table with children while they're homeschooling, sharing the dinner table with other people like their parents, because they don't have a separate room in which to participate on the video conference with as well. A lot of people said to me they thought technology and the audio and all of that will get in higher when it came to the derailers when it comes to video conferencing. So I'm curious, again in the chat window, are there any there that you think are missing when it comes to derailers for you right now? What's in your way? What's in your field of vision that I can't see that might be interrupting you? Pop it in the chat box so we can all learn from each other.
I don't know if you can see them, Oscar. So we've got Denise said my phone. Martin said my main monitor. Barry, oh, I like Barry. Sometimes simply being hungry.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one, Barry. I like it. Not
Kerry's got
enough people
neighbours.
think of their physical situation.
Kerry's got neighbours next door mowing the lawn,
Oh, nice.
preparing coffee, Yannick.
Yeah, I had somebody with a chainsaw yesterday. I'm just grateful they're not there today. I love the one from Yolanda. People who kind of in the chat technology are trying to have side conversations with you. That's a really interesting example of how coalitions or political groups start to emerge on really big video conferences as well. Nice one. Leaf blowers, yeah, I like that. The neighbors' kids, the room temperature. Thanks, Michelle. And we can see these things that are getting in our way and we're not even conscious of them. Ian was on a webinar recently where he was talking about the fact that when he went walking around in a park, he actually noticed the sound of birds for the first time in a long time. And that's something that surprised him. He also was surprised how many different birds there were in Australia compared to where he was when he was growing up, and the sounds. So when it comes to listening, the biggest thing that gets in our way, ironically, is not all these external things. It's the radio station that's playing in our head before we come to the conversation. Most of us don't take the time to pause and gather our thoughts and just focus on what we're about to do next. So listening to yourself is really critical. And there's two ways to look at listening to yourself. The first way to look at listening to yourself is your focus and orientation on you, or is your focus and orientation on others? Because if your orientation is on you, most of that is going to be, you mightn't even be there. You might be completely absent from the conversation with the kids. You mightn't be there. So, you know, the kids are trying to ask you where the red text to colors is for this homework that they're trying to do, and you're on a call, so you're trying to move them away. So this is the opposite, where we've got other people trying to get our attention in there as well. Then we've got, you know, I'm worn out. Another meeting? Is that what I've got to have? Oh my goodness, help me out. And then you're turned up, you're logged in, but are you really interested in what's going on? For a lot of us, we're not, because we've got many other things going on in our life right now. And we really want to make sure there. For most of us, we find ourselves in this state, the state of distraction. So I'd love everybody to orientate themselves on this map and say, hey, where are you when it comes to listening on this map? Are you absent? Are you fatigued? Are you disinterested? Are you distracted? Or are you available, present, interested in making a contribution? Now, ironically, you're probably going to be making a contribution by going into the chat window, but not everybody on this webinar will. So that's okay. That's no problem at all. So for those of you who can and you want to engage, just let us know. Where are you on this journey? Fatigued, distracted? These are the ones coming up early on. And again, if you pop into listeningquiz.com after this, you can go and take the assessment and find out what are the big barriers for you when it comes to listening yourself. Okay, so thank you to Vanessa and Anna. Some interesting above and below that line, present and interested, fantastic. And then we've got some presence there as well. So thank you very much for everybody who's kind of assessed themselves on this journey, because for most of us, we're not even conscious that we are fatigued. We aren't even conscious that we need to move up these ladders of contribution. For most of us, all we want to do is just simply notice where are we at? Where are we at on this journey? So for a lot of us, we want to make progress, and we want to make progress in a way that's effective for us and effective for others as well. So let's have a quick look now. What is it when it comes to, what are these 3 listening hacks? Now, Ian, we haven't spent much time talking about children. And my assumption is not everybody on this call has got children at home where they are. But at some point in our life, we have been a child, and we probably might be an uncle or a friend to somebody who's got children as well. So I've interviewed a number of child psychologists when it comes to listening. And the most important thing that most adults miss when it comes to listening to children is they talk over the top of the child. They literally are standing up and talking over the head of the child. For the child, it feels like that they're being talked to, where they're right in over the top. And when parents or other adults say, oh, I wonder if they're listening, or are you listening? The reality is eye level is ear level. There's a reason that's been designed in our human system. So the most important thing you can do when it comes to listening to your children is get down to their eye level, or alternatively, pick your child up, put them on a bench so that your eye level is at their eye level. That does two things. That means when you speak to them, they can actually hear you effectively. And the second thing is your mindset changes quite rapidly when it comes to listening to them, because all of a sudden you're engaging at eye level as well. What the child psychologists have said is children, but also adults, will go through four things when they're not really listening. They're hungry, they're angry, they're lost, or they're threatened. H-A-L-T, halt. So for a lot of us, when we keep repeating the same thing to clean up your room and clean up your room, or whatever the task is that you want to do with children, bear in mind that if your eye level is at their eye level, when you give the instruction, all of a sudden you're going to change the dynamic completely. And you will find that your listening productivity actually triples in that case. By the way, the same is true if you phone them or FaceTime them. So if you're FaceTiming or phoning them, sit down in an eye level that would be at their same eye level. Try and avoid standing up if you travel. Not so much at the moment, but try and avoid speaking to them while you're walking around the room. It creates a big power differential between you and your child as well. So H-A-L-T, think about those things. Hungry, angry, lonely, and feeling threatened. These are the things that are getting in the way when it comes to our children. By the way, if your kids are at the teenage years, there is a slightly different way that teenage boys listen compared to teenage girls. Teenage girls have no problem if you interact with them with eye contact straight on, particularly over a cup of tea or a milkshake or whatever that might be, or a cup of coffee. With adult boys, their listening effectiveness increases if you can give them something to do with their hands, if you're walking with them, so you might give them a task in the kitchen, but face away from each other. Because in the way the male chemicals are released in the body, eye-to-eye contact is often interpreted as a threat, and the cortisol is released in the brain. So if you've got a teenage boy, some gardening, some chopping up of the vegetables at home, or just walking together around in a park, will get you a completely different level of engagement when it comes to listening there as well. What are your tips when it comes to children and listening? Let's pop it in the chat box so we can all learn from each other, because I think although I've spent a lot of time studying this, quite often there's a lot of wisdom in the room from parents and people who used to be children as well. What's the best tip you've ever been given when it comes to listening to your children? Okay, great. Genuinely wanting to hear them. That's a lovely insight there from Adam. Thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is move to the 3 tips. We're going to move to the 3 tips when it comes to increasing your listening effectiveness, whether it's your children, whether it's other adults, whether it's on video conferences, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's on the telephone. Tip number 1, anticipate that distractions are going to come about. So switch your phone to flight mode if you can't switch it off. For a lot of us, the idea of switching our mobile phone off is the equivalent of a drug addict going cold turkey. And for many of us, I would suggest that switch your phone to silent if you're uncomfortable as a starting point, then switch your phone to flight mode. Eventually you can move to switching it off. There's a really important reason why the software application industry is partnered with the same psychologists who build the software for poker machines. The act of pressing a button on a slot machine or a poker machine is no different to scrolling down on a screen. And they have used the exact same psychological techniques to keep you distracted, whether that's on a message through an app notifying you or a scroll when it comes to your social media feeds as well. I'm not saying technology is bad, but what I am saying is use the technology, don't let the technology use you. Tip number 2, the deeper you breathe, the deeper you listen. In 1993, in Ottawa, in Canada, 414 students were paired off with each other, and they were connected to a device that measured their heart rate and their oxygen levels. They were then asked to rate the effectiveness of the conversation from both a speaking and a listening perspective. What surprised the researchers was the people with the highest O2 levels, the highest oxygen levels, self-reported and other reported that listening was more effective when correlated to the level of oxygen, which was really interesting. So the easiest way to do that is breathe deeply. Now, Ian, I know you've had a number of speakers already who've spoken to this on the series, and it's a great series. If you haven't had a chance to listen to Sarah, Jenny, Michael Bungay-Stanya, and all the other speakers, there's some amazing insights in there as well. And if you want to, you can listen at a 2x speed and still have comprehension. But the tip was really simple. When you breathe in through your nose, down to the bottom of your lungs, and then out through your mouth. If you can do that 3 times, whether you want to interrupt somebody, whether you're getting frustrated and bored with somebody, it's a really big mental shortcut, and it's a shortcut for the nervous system. Once the nervous system knows that you're not under threat, your ability to listen is much more extended. So again, if you want to double your listening productivity, take 1 deep breath during the conversation, 3 deep breaths prior to the conversation, and you'll be shocked. And then finally, drink water. I know it sounds really basic. A hydrated brain is a listening brain. And the reason you want to drink water is that the brain is 5% of the body mass, yet it consumes 26% of the blood sugars. And the fastest way to get blood sugars to the brain is to drink water. Now you can drink coffee, no problem. I'm not telling you to stop drinking coffee or tea or any other substance. But please, every half an hour, drink at least 1 glass of water, and you'll be surprised how different you feel when it comes to listening. And in fact, any complex creative task that you want to undertake, getting water into your system, Ian, is the most powerful thing. And from those 3 tips there, which one is going to be the one that's going to work most for you? Ian, I think you're muted. I can see a little red microphone on the bottom of your screen with a little cross through it, Ian. For the rest of us, which one of those 3 tips is going to be the one you're going to use straight away? Yeah, the breathing consistently is one of the ones that people find it's really practical. It's really simple. It's really something you can do immediately. In fact, I'd encourage you all to do it right now. Ian, even though your microphone's muted, you can practice taking 3 deep breaths as well too. Well, I'm really grateful that you've all decided to spend some time with me today, moving from a distracted listener to a deep listener. I want to finish up with a story of Mick. And Mick was a client of mine from 3 years ago, and he called me on a Monday morning at 8:15. And I remember the 8:15 because I was driving somewhere. And at 8:15, he called me and he said, "You nearly cost me my marriage, Oscar." All right, it says there, Ian, can you unmute everybody and then put them back on mute? Maybe that's the problem. That's a good suggestion from the chat window. Let's make sure we're listening to them as well. We've got some really good tips there saying, Ian, bottom left, unmute. No, he's given up in disgust. All right, let's finish off with the story of Mick. Mick called me at 8:15 on a Monday morning. I was traveling towards the city, and I remember that time very well. He said, "You nearly cost me my marriage, Oscar. Last Friday night, my wife said to me the one thing every man doesn't want to hear." I said, "Mick, what was that?" And he said, "We need..." He said, "We need to talk." And I said, "So what happened next?" And she said, "You nearly cost me my marriage." And she said to him, "Please, just tell me the truth. I know you're having an affair. I just need you to tell me who's the affair with." And in that moment, Mick collected his thoughts and simply said, "Tell me more." And she said, "For the last 90 days, you've paid me so much more attention than you have in the 12 years of our marriage. I know you're having an affair." Okay. Ian's just left a message saying, "Sorry, Oscar, I think my laptop has died." So we'll wave farewell to Ian. Back to the story of Mick and his wife. She said, "I know you're having an affair because in the 12 years of our marriage, you've never paid me so much attention as you have right now." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you who it is, but you'll be surprised." And she said, "Just tell me the truth. Who is it?" And he said, "It's a man." And she burst out into tears. And he said, "It's a man who's helping me how to listen." And she breathed out a sigh of relief and she stopped sobbing and said, "Yes, I've noticed you've listened to me. You've never paid me so much attention as you have in the last 12 years of our marriage." Now, what Ian told me next was X-rated, and he said he had a better night than his honeymoon. But for a lot of us out there, the act of listening will keep our relationships going, not only at home and at work, but also with our children too. Ian, welcome back.
Apologise. I have no idea what happened then. It just wouldn't work. Yeah, sorry for that, folks. Anticipate distractions. Well, that was a perfect example of an anticipated of a distraction. So I am very sorry. I did mute the speaker, but I don't know what happened. So did everyone hear what Oscar just said? I hope that was the case.
I sense they did, yes.
They did. They did indeed. Fantastic.
All right. So, Ian, from me, and I'm very grateful that everybody's had the opportunity to spend some time with us today. I'd be delighted to take any real-time questions. I'd encourage everybody to undertake the listening quiz at listeningquiz.com and discover whether you're a distracted listener, a lost listener, an interrupting listener, or a shrewd listener, because you'll get a very simple action plan with 3 very specific steps based directly on your listening barriers about what to do in the next 90 days about it as well.
There was a question earlier on which I'd like to come back to if I can, if you're okay
Yes,
with
please,
this.
of course.
It was that most colleagues often don't feel comfortable with phones on silent because how will kids reach me? Any tips?
Yeah, I would say to the group that you're meeting with, my phone's not on silent in case I have an issue with one of my children. So one of the things that improves listening is making the implicit explicit, and just discussing that in advance is really helpful. The opposite is true too. If the kids do phone during a meeting and there is more than you present in that meeting, go outside, take that call outside, and just excuse yourself from the room. So yes, there are all these issues that you may need to be contacted, but even in a silent state, the phone's going to beep. It's still going to buzz, and you'll still be able to be notified. And hopefully that tip is helpful to discuss that you're anticipating a call from the school or a doctor. We've just had an issue with my mother-in-law passing away, and we've had to design a funeral over video technology in the last couple of days as well. So there's all these unanticipated issues that pop up, Ian. Hopefully that's helpful. Who asked that question, by the way?
It was Yannick, who's actually in Malaysia at the
Thanks,
moment.
Yannick. Hopefully that answers your question.
We've got time for one more question if anyone has any. Oscar, what do you do when you realize the person you are speaking to is not present?
Oh, I love this question.
Does it involve throwing a glass of water at them?
Just do what I just did. Just pause. Be silent, and it will engage them straight away. Ian couldn't help but fill the
You're
space
right.
with
I fell for a hook, line, and sinker.
completely unrehearsed.
I thought
So
you'd gone into a
into
frozen
the
state. I
freeze
thought there was
mode.
something wrong with my laptop again.
Yeah. So for that question, if the speaker isn't present or the opposite is true, just pause. Just pause. Just wait for them. The same is true if they take something on their phone. The same is true if they are popping in, have to pop out. Just pause. Just wait. In the West, it's really interesting. We have this weird relationship with silence. We call it the awkward pause, the pregnant pause, the deafening silence. Yet in the East, in ancient cultures, silence is a sign of wisdom, respect, and authority. So just pausing is one of the most powerful ways to do that. Go back to the very first webinar. Michael Bungay Stania talks about the or question and what else with a pause, and it will make a huge difference there as well. So hopefully that answers the question for them. If not, that's fine. Let me know if they need a clarification.
That was excellent. That's very good actually. I'm really like that. I jumped in. Couldn't stand the thought. I couldn't stand the silence. Folks, thank you for being involved here this morning, this Thursday morning. Hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Oscar, thank you. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. Sorry for the techie issues, but you were brilliant. If you have any further questions, please either reach out to myself or to Oscar, and we'd be more than happy to have a chat. The webinar series will be recorded and on our website. So if you'd like to listen again to Oscar, tell all your friends about Oscar's session or any of the others. We've got some really good stuff up there. Please do that. The more people that watch them, the better. And
Ian, the one thing I'd ask, if you could just write in the chat box of one thing you've found most valuable from the last 45 minutes, that would be grateful. That's a way I can understand what I said that was worth listening to. Thanks for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you, folks. Have a great day. And yeah, contact us if you do have any questions. I'm going to breathe more and increase my water intake. Fantastic. How men and women listen differently. I could have told you that before this one, Yolanda, actually, I think. Brilliant, folks. Well, have a lovely afternoon, lovely rest of your day. And Oscar, again, thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, folks.